the numerous interrogations took its toll on me. My health broke down after giving birth, and for some months I had to keep my bed in my room in the belfry or bell tower. In spite of my suffering condition, Elizabeth's relentless persecution continued. She put spies about the tower, who informed her of any attempt at communication between Hertford and me, and the Queen was violently excited on learning that my husband had been inquiring after my health, through a third person, a tower official, and that he had on one occasion actually sent me a posy. I was interrogated even about this simple incident, but I never saw the person who brought me messages and posies from Edward. On May 12, 1562, the commission, composed of the officers who had examined Hertford on his first entering the Tower, passed sentence at the Bishop of London's palace to the effect that there had been no marriage between the Earl of Hertford and the Lady Katherine Grey. 5 months later, in October 1562, I came nearer being placed on the throne than at any time in my life. On the 10th of that month, Queen Elizabeth went with her train to Hampton Court, and there fell seriously ill. After several days of high fever, and a fit of syncope lasting 2 hours, during which her life was despaired of, Her Majesty was found to be suffering from smallpox, aggravated by a bad chill. Naturally, the chief effect of the Queen's sudden illness was to raise the hopes of the various pretenders to her succession and of those who from interest or conviction, supported them. My partisans did not miss this opportunity to agitate in my favor, and in the event of the Queen's death, a determined attempt would undoubtedly have been made to seat me on the throne of my oppressor. The council discussed the succession twice, and there were 3 different opinions. Some wished King Henry's will to be followed and I declared heiress. Others, who found flaws in the will, were in favour of the Earl of Huntingdon. Lord Robert Dudley and some others were in favour of this. A few members of the council wished the others not to be in such a furious hurry, and advised them to wait until the claims of the various pretenders had been examined by the greatest jurists in the country, a suggestion regarded, however, as simply an expedient to give the King of Spain time to place a Catholic sovereign on the English throne. Elizabeth, however, made a rapid recovery. To the consternation of the council, her first act, after the prolonged syncope into which she had fallen, was to ask the said council to appoint the Lord Robert Dudley Protector of the realm during her convalescence, at an income of £20,000. In November 1562, the question of the succession was again discussed, at a meeting attended by the Duke of Norfolk and others, which was held in the Earl of Arundel's house. The council discussed these grave matters all one evening until 2 o'clock the next morning, when they parted, unanimously in favour of my right to the throne after the Queen's death. When Elizabeth heard of the affair, she actually wept for rage, and summoning Arundel, upbraided him in no measured terms for allowing such a meeting to take place under his roof. The Earl, in an offhand manner, told the Queen that if she wanted to govern the country by passion, he could assure her the nobles would not allow her to do so, whereupon Her Majesty, abashed, hastily changed the subject. During the winter of 1562–63, my partisans directed their attention to Hertford, and at one time, led by Cecil, seriously proposed setting him up as a claimant to the throne. Needless to say, the Earl, except for his position as my husband, had no more to do with the succession than any other nobleman. Cecil, however, was still anxious to aid me and my husband, and had it depended on him, doubtless we would have been forthwith set at liberty. He was hostile to Lord Robert Dudley, and moreover jealous of his influence, and being out of favour with the Queen in consequence, was quite prepared to aid her rival. Not improbably, the Queen's persistent refusal to be merciful to her captives was to some extent caused by a desire to annoy and embarrass her chief secretary. Elizabeth's health being still unsatisfactory, early in 1563, the question of the succession was again brought before Parliament, and Cecil, as a solution to the difficulty, proposed that a committee should be formed of 24 members of the Privy Council, who, in the event of the Queen's death, would conduct the affairs of the nation for the first 3 weeks after the sovereign's demise, until a successor had been approved of by them. The gentlemen nominated for this high office, however, one and all begged to be excused, pleading that they felt safer on their country estates than if they were all gathered together in London. The fact is, it was well known that Cecil had determined to try to include amongst these councillors as many of the male claimants to the throne or their chief supporters as he conveniently could, his real object being, it was suspected, to attempt, when the Queen died, a coup similar to that which followed on the death of Edward VI. Hertford and I would be released, and, supported by the Londoners, since the city being so much in favour of the Earl of Hertford on the ground of religion, I would be crowned Queen, as my sister Jane had been. But the opposition being too strong, the scheme was forthwith dropped, and the vexed question of the succession was again left in abeyance for a time being. Whilst my name was thus being bandied about by various political factions, I remained a peaceful sad prisoner in the Tower. However, the old Italian proverb, that neither walls nor waters can separate lovers, once more proved true. One day, when I was absorbed with my sadness, the door opened. I couldn't believe my eyes, it was my beloved husband standing in the doorway. While I was still in a shocking state, he came up to me and hugged and kissed me dearly. It happened so that Edward had managed to persuade the lieutenant of the Tower to allow him to visit me since I was his wife, and the lieutenant gave in. While we were holding each other in our arms, I thought my life was like a bottomless abyss with a few rare stars on it, but oh how bright they were. The time stood still for us, and the few hours we belonged to each other seemed like a flash. I felt there were only two of us in the whole universe, and all my sorrows, longing and tears were melted away. Edward visited me in my prison chamber yet once more, and the fruit of our passion did not take long to appear. The lieutenant refused to let my lord to come to my room the third time, so we were only given permission to speak through the door. That was when I informed Edward that I was pregnant with another child of his. On February 10, 1563, notwithstanding Elizabeth's vigilance, and the strict orders issued to us, I became the mother of a second boy, who was baptized in St. Peter's in the Tower, with two warders acting as godfathers. He received the name of Thomas, after his great-uncle, the Lord High Admiral. Elizabeth, when she heard of this second child's birth, raged less like Medea than one of her dragon. She vented her spleen on Hertford, who was hailed before Star Chamber to justify himself of the further offence of having visited me in prison. Edward, attacked in the coarsest terms, replied like a man, that being lawfully married to the Lady Katherine Grey, who hath borne me a fair son during the time of our imprisonment in the Tower, and finding her prison door unbarred, I came in to comfort her in her sadness, of which I cannot repent. Nevertheless, Hertford was heavily fined, 15,000 marks in all, 5,000 for seducing a virgin of the blood royal, 5,000 for breaking prison when he left his own apartments to visit me, and 5,000 for the birth of the second child, described by the chamber as a bastard. Since Hertford had no sufficient money to pay this sum offhand, his estates were, as usual in such cases, confiscated instead. Elizabeth now ordered Sir Edward Warner, Lieutenant of the Tower, to be arrested and forthwith confined in that fortress over which he had lately ruled supreme. He had indeed been imprisoned there once before, for alleged complicity in the Wyatt Rebellion, and had only been reinstated as lieutenant at Elizabeth's accession. Through the influence of Cecil, his close friend, Warner contrived to regain his freedom, after his second imprisonment, in 1563, but he lost his post, this time for good, and retired into the country. In summer of 1563, a mysterious sinister stranger, called Mr. Plague, attacked London without mercy with his icy fingers. More than 20,000 people in the city and surrounding parishes perished during the outbreak. The plague broke out with such violence and made so many victims within the precincts of the Tower, that I became extremely alarmed, knowing the little lives I was responsible for were in great danger.